All set? Awesome. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode. I I'm always excited for my guests, and I always say this, but I actually got to meet one of my favorite people in the world. Honestly, and it's because I've read absolutely everything that she's created. Most recently, last year during my tour. So I really, really appreciate the time that I'm about to spend with this person. But I'm going to allow her to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Ellen O. I write middle grade and young adult novels. I still am trying to write a picture book. I'm very, very jealous of picture book authors. It's really hard to write a picture book. Um, and I'm also a founding member of We Need Diverse Books, which our mission is to make sure that all children can see themselves in the pages of a book, which we know is so important.
Hmm.
And let's see, I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. I live right outside the Washington, D.C. area in Rockville, Maryland. And, oh, that was my phone. And I think that's it.
I'm so excited that you're here, and you are very humble, very very humble. Um, I love absolutely everything that you do, and what I think you do for literature, children, education, the whole gamut is just absolutely incredible. So before anything, I appreciate you for always pushing the needle and always striving for what you believe is the right thing to do in regards to humans. So I appreciate you so much for that. Um, you're honestly you're a phenomenal human. So thank you very
Oh,
much.
thank you.
No, thank you. So I always ask this question. I'm so curious, and I've read about you and I've seen bios about you, but now I get to hear it from you. Can you tell me a little bit about Little Ellen? Who's Little Ellen, and what are some of the things that you were brought up with, the places that you would have come from, etc.
So little Ellen was a quite a angry little child. I was, mm, I don't know why, but I think it's actually because my dad, he would always tell me like stories about scary things that are like going to eat bad children named Ellen. So I always like had to be very aware of all the scary things in the world. And also I was
Hmm.
growing up in New York, and I'm a Gen Xer, so that means I was growing up in what the period where people were just like really in your face about racism, right? And
Hmm.
like it's not a comfortable thing growing up that way. It does affect you in a lot of ways. And I say this, I never saw some good representation of myself in a book. And
Hmm.
I didn't know how much that affected me until I was much older in college, I think. And I read the Joy Luck Club. And I was like, wow, it's kind of that mind blowing experience when you never know what you didn't know because you never saw
Hmm.
it. And then you
Hmm.
see it and you're like, wow, this is what it feels like to read a book and see yourself and your family and your community. And not just you're reading it, but the whole world is reading it,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And that was the moment where I realized that I had internalized so much self hatred and so much like, uh, just feeling like being Asian American was being almost nothing. Like,
Wow.
because I think Asian Americans say that a lot. I hope, well, maybe my generation more than newer generations, I hope.
Hmm.
But it's that feeling of being stuck between two cultures where one culture is telling you that you will never be American enough, right? Because you will always be the perpetual outsider, the perpetual
Hmm.
foreigner. And
Hmm.
then the other side that says, you're not Asian enough. Don't even try to come in and pretend
Hmm.
that you're Asian, right?
Hmm.
So like that, the being in between made me a very angry person, like
Hmm.
angry child, angry teen. And then when I started to discover my appreciation and my love for my culture,
Hmm.
right? That's really when I started to be more accepting of myself. But I don't think I ever got rid of the anger. I'm
Hmm.
only now starting to get less angry because I'm tired. You know?
Yep.
Although actually there's much more stuff I feel that, that we have to be angry about right now,
Uh-huh.
and also, man, I'm tired.
Of course you are. Of course you are. And you're making me think about so many things. Like, did you have representation in school at all in regards to friendships, in regards to teachers? Did you have that?
I had a little bit because I grew up in New York, so you do
Mm-hmm.
have some, you do have a lot of Asians,
Mm-hmm.
um, but it's not the same as like Asians from Southern California, right?
Sure.
Like it's a different experience,
Mm-hmm.
East Asians, oh, Midwest Asians. I mean, I don't even know how you're an Asian from Alabama or Arkansas and not come out with some serious issues.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So like I feel like because my community was there for me, it might not have been as bad as if I was growing up in Kansas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it would be very different. It definitely would be very, very different, right?
Yeah, so I recognize there are many stages of that, like of the anger and feeling the othering. Like
Uh-huh.
Southern Californians need to shut up. They don't know that experience that much, uh,
Uh-huh.
right? Like my husband actually grew up in Maryland, and he will tell me
Okay.
stories about being the only Asian in his whole grade. I've never
Wow.
had that experience,
Mm-hmm.
but I still have had that experience of being the minority.
Mm-hmm. Of course. Of course. And I know, again, based on just like reading your books and seeing your bio multiple times, you've also explored multiple avenues in regards to education. So, um, I don't know if you're still practicing, but there is a point where you have background in being like a lawyer, which I think is amazing. Um, Tell me about the journey with being a lawyer, um, and how did that transition happen from being a lawyer to being a writer to being, I think it was like a professor or an instructor in college as well. Like, tell me about that transition.
Okay, so I'm the typical Asian story of having the dragon mom that was like, "You're going to be a doctor because I said you're going to be a doctor," right?
Mm-hmm.
I went
Mm-hmm.
to uh, I went to college young. I just turned 16 when I started at NYU,
Wow.
and like at 16 you do whatever your parents say, and I did pre med and I hated it. I really, really hated it, and
Mm-hmm.
I was totally into the idea of being a prosecutor. Like that was just the glamorous idea, right? I don't know. I think Law and Order had started, and I really was into that. I,
Mm-hmm.
at some point, I just was like, really just so into the idea of being a prosecutor, and that's what I wanted. And it made sense. Like when I was younger, my favorite book was like The Count of Monte Cristo, and I had this revenge complex. So I'm like,
Uh-huh.
yes, I'm gonna be a prosecutor. I'm gonna fight bad guys. Like that was my mindset. And so I decided I wanted to go to law school. And when I switched, my mom didn't speak to me for a year, and I
Mm-hmm.
was living at home. So that was an interesting, like, that's but then I got into law school, and I went to Georgetown Law School, and I thought, okay, now I'm gonna go the path I want to.
Mm-hmm.
But I just happened to graduate when the market was the worst for lawyers. So like all my plans of going into and being a prosecutor kind of got, uh, you know, just sideswept, and I
Mm-hmm.
ended up going into a firm which I hated, and so then like this whole different kind of avenue of law opened up, which is just not as fun and interesting and very different from what I imagined. And basically, I ended up being a contract lawyer, but I did a lot of
Mm-hmm.
nonprofit. Like, I couldn't stand being at private practice, so I ended up going the nonprofit route, and I was in working for public broadcasting, and then I was working for the National Wildlife Federation, and that was like much more like my speed, but I'm still only
Mm-hmm.
like a contracts attorney. And around then, and this is where the writing comes in, this is how long ago it was the year 2000, and
Okay.
Time Magazine, one of the covers for Time Magazine was, man of the millennium, Genghis Khan. And I was like,
Wow.
Genghis Khan, he's Asian. I was like, this magazine is celebrating an Asian man as the man of the millennium. I'm like, wait, I don't know enough about Genghis Khan. So I picked up a
Hmm.
biography and I started.
Wow.
And here's the funny thing, because when your when your education is very Western centric, you don't learn
Yeah.
a lot of Asian history, right?
Hmm.
I learned all this Korean history I had never known, and it
Wow.
was fascinating. Yeah, in a biography of a Mongol, I learned about Korean history because they took over everything. So
Hmm.
like I learned Chinese history, Korean history, and I was like, wow, this is so fascinating. I want more. And what I found was there's not like Korean in the
Yeah.
States starts at the Korean War, and they don't really have
Yeah.
anything,
Yeah.
right? So I was like, well, how do I look up more about Korean history? And I just happened to, well, so my organization that I was last at had a big reorganization, and
Hmm.
the general counsel that I loved was leaving, and I was being offered a general counsel job, but I was reporting to someone I wasn't that keen on, and my husband said, "Then just quit, and then work on that book that you said you wanted to work on." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, I will." But I had this like I'm so Asian. Like my parents just beat it into me that I have to always be working, and I was like, I can't just work on a
Stop.
book. So
Of course.
I I decided I
Hmm.
would teach at George Mason University, and so I was a adjunct professor there, um, and which was great because then I had the whole library system, right, the university library system
Hmm.
at
Hmm.
my fingertips. And so lots of research that way, right? Through journals. Like who knew
Hmm.
all these
Hmm.
journals?
Hmm.
So I learned a lot and I started writing and that um, I got a 3-book deal, which was my prophecy series. And at that point I decided, okay, well, now it's starting to get hard to juggle deadlines and
Hmm.
kids. Um, Also, I started to work on We Need Diverse books. And so I decided to stop teaching. I wasn't practicing law and I focused on writing. I focused on starting a nonprofit organization, which that was a lot of work. And
Yeah.
that's kind of
Yeah.
like how I ended up here.
Wow. That's it's so. I mean, I have so many questions because I've seen We Need Diverse books for so long, and the work that you guys do for everyone, authors, educators, children, parents, homes, etc. Um, I want to talk about it, but I have so many questions about your journey. I have so many questions about your journey. I want to go back to um, not too far back, but like when was the point where you were like, I want to write stories for kids. Like I want to generate these ideas of like middle. You write phenomenal middle grade stories, like phenomenal. Like why middle grade? Like what made you think like, oh, I think this is the lane that I want to go into? Because you could have done adult. You could have done
Nah.
something else. No, you're like not for me.
So I started, I wrote like 2 or 3 terrible, horrible, no good adult books that,
Ah,
right, just it was like pulling teeth, right? And
mm-hmm,
it wasn't for the lack of research. I did so much research. So I was well versed in the topic, and I wrote it, but it was like pulling teeth, writing every word. It felt hard and
mm-hmm,
difficult, and just it was a not. It didn't feel kind of natural to me.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Maybe it was a voice thing. Whereas when I started writing, I started with prophecy, which I actually wrote middle grade version. That was the draft I started
ah,
with.
interesting.
And then the agents that I got made me push it up. And so I ended up with a YA novel.
Wow,
Started middle grade because the protagonist was the young 12-year-old prince.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I don't talk about this.
I don't talk.
Except when I do talk about it, so this is how I say it. I started the story with the prince, who everybody thinks is the hero,
Uh
and then
huh.
I realized that because the story is all about how no, it's not the prince; it's actually his girl cousin.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I realized that, like, it really made more sense to tell the story from her perspective, and she needed to be older, right? to be
Mhm.
kind of like the hero of the world. That's really how that started. And to be honest, I think middle grade is where I feel most comfortable
Mm.
because I think I have this, like, I inside I am like a 10-year-old child, just
Mhm.
sometimes writing. And I just had my young adult novel came out, and
Mhm.
writing kissing scenes was like, oh, kissing, ew, totally like a 10-year-old kid, right? Ew, they're kissing again. So when I write middle grade, it's fun, it's
Yeah.
joyous. And
Uh-huh.
I think it's because when I started writing, my kids were that age, right? They were um,
Sure.
in that space,
Mhm.
and they were just constantly in my head. And I do think that who surrounds you at the beginning of your writing journey
Mhm. Mhm.
is very fundamental to
Oh,
how you change as an author too.
I 100% agree with that. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And I can, like, it gave me goosebumps you saying that because I can vividly remember my like aha moment with my cousin Shantae Grant. I speak about her very often in presentations and whenever someone asks about my influence, and she was someone in our community. She wrote books that looked like me about my community. She published them, and then she did a workshop at my high school, and it was on spoken word. And the way she allowed me to play with words, I was like, wow, I don't have to follow a specific format when I'm sharing my story. I don't have to spell the words the way they're spelled in the dictionary. I can spell the words the way that I actually say them. And that, like, really transformed my thought process in regards to what a writer looks like. So when you say the people that are surrounded around you like are such a huge influence, I totally hear that, and I can see why you would have felt that way as well. And can you tell me more about your love for middle school kids? Because my wife is a middle school teacher, and I think middle school kids are so quirky. I think they always have fun stories. But there has been a lot of talk, and I'm online quite often, usually looking at sports. But there has been a lot of stuff about like how middle school, um, not necessarily middle school books, but the middle school is kind of like in this place right now where it's not getting enough attention. Um, why is middle school so special? Because it is. It really, really is special. It's a special place for writing. So can you tell me why is it special for you?
So, as you just mentioned, you said school visit changed your life, kind of,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I do think that authors, especially authors from marginalized communities, need to go into schools because kids need to see them. That is
Mm-hmm.
so important,
Mm-hmm.
but especially in middle school. There's
Mm-hmm.
no doubt in my mind that middle school is a living hell. Just period. It's Think about it. You got hundreds, thousands of in the most torturous period of their life with hormones and just like they start to stink, and they're feeling all
There's
emotional,
a
and
lot. It's a lot.
a lot going on that period. Like I tell parents that as your little kids that are so cute when they're babies, as soon as they hit 11, 12, they will change. They are not cute, but you still love them, right?
You
And
do. You
that's
do.
exactly the thing. Is like middle school is that period where it's so hard. They are going through so much turmoil,
Mm-hmm.
and I think they need adults to listen to
Mm-hmm.
them and be there for them more than anything. And I can say without um, any doubt in my heart that the adults in middle school who surrounded my middle child, especially,
Mm-hmm.
and also my youngest during those really difficult ages were the ones that saved their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Because both my kids had
Mm-hmm.
issues with depression and they had issues with bullying. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if it hadn't been for those caring teachers and counselors in middle school, right? I don't know what would have happened to my kids.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a really extra care that has to go in,
I agree.
and that's why I focus on middle school a lot because I think that they need us the most.
I agree. I totally agree. And I coached a number of teams, and middle school teams have always been my favorite. Specifically, the last 2 years, I coach middle school girls basketball. And I've coached, not at every level, but I've coached university basketball when I was doing my BED. I did high school boys, high school girls, and middle school girls. The last 2 years has been the most fun that I've ever had coaching in my entire life. And I think we had a good group of kids, but I think just like the way they were able to connect with each other, and the way we built community was so fun. And all those things you just mentioned were still happening. So they were
Mhm.
going through relationship stuff. They were figuring out school. Some of them were even transitioning from different countries and finding new friendships. They are dealing with much so much. But when they find the right people, you literally see such a shift in their mindset and how they carry themselves. And I saw that with some of the girls on the team. Just having a community in itself really, really helped them not just get through this season, but they come back to my classroom and they want to hang out, or when we see each other in the hallway. Like that connection in itself has been so phenomenal. So I don't teach middle school. I'm an elementary school teacher, but I do love middle school kids so much. I really, really do. I think they're so awesome. I want to talk to you a little bit more about We Need Diverse Books. And I have a couple questions written down. You've probably answered this 1,000 times, but I have you here. I do have you here. So the question was like, how do you see the work of like We Need Diverse Books and the intersection with the issues of banned books and the challenges of like diverse literature, specifically with middle grade or young adult? And what is like not necessarily your role, but like a writer's role in all of that?
So I think that the challenges and the book bans have come up as a direct response to the success of We Need Diverse Books, because the reality is, you look everybody go and look at that 2012
Mm-hmm.
pictograph, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was what was so powerful about it was that it really the visual of it, seeing that graph of how many books,
Mm-hmm.
um, how few books there were for kids of color compared to white kids, and that was in 2012. In 2014, and in 2012 they said 7% of books published in the children's book industry were about children of color and by people of color, and that number in 2014 was 8%. And now, right, after 10 years of work, that number went
Mm-hmm.
up to 45%, right? So when you see that kind of an increase, you know that the movement was successful, right?
Mm-hmm.
The movement was successful in bringing more diverse voices out because publishing as a whole responded so positively. On every point, from writers and creators to librarians and teachers and publishing
Mm-hmm.
itself, they all uplifted marginalized voices. And
Mm-hmm.
that's important, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you see that huge increase, which we can say is directly in relation to our programs that we
Mm-hmm.
ran. When you see that huge increase, what you also have to expect is the backlash, right?
Of
You have
course.
to expect it. None of
Mm-hmm.
us were surprised. This actually happened exactly the same way in the 80s, right? When Walter
Mm-hmm.
Dean Myers was being published. And he even
Mm-hmm.
wrote those op-eds about it.
Mm-hmm.
How there was this beautiful age of multicultural book
Mm-hmm.
renaissance in the
Mm-hmm.
70s, right? And maybe it was in the 80s that it started to get cut down because
Mm-hmm.
libraries were funding was getting slashed and all that. And so we expect that to happen. Uh, but what's a little bit different now, as was different for us, and what made our success different was social media. And so social media has compounded this ability to be just this very loud, very scary,
Mm-hmm.
echo chamber.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was good at the beginning. It's now kind of scary and dangerous. And people talk about cancel culture, which is not a thing. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, uh, uh, all you got to do is look at J.K. Rowling and see she's still selling a hell of a lot of books. So
Yep.
please tell me about cancel culture. cancel culture only exists for like marginalized communities, actually.
It's very true. That is
But
very, very true.
right, and so when you look at what's happening, what we have to do is figure out a way to make people realize that when they're banning books, the underlying reason, right, is always about putting down the voices of marginalized communities.
Mhm.
You know, they can cover it in any way they want. Oh, this is porn. Oh, this is
Mhm.
not, appropriate. But
Mhm.
that's what's happening, right? And
Mhm.
one of the most beautiful things that I saw was they said Gen X, not
Mhm.
that's me, Gen Z, right?
Mhm.
Gen Z is the most empathetic, most compassionate, most accepting
Wow.
of identities of all generations, of any generation to ever come. Gen Z is the most
Huh.
compassionate and empathetic generation. And I think that's beautiful. But look at the ages of Gen Z. Look at when We Need Diverse Books became successful. The
Mhm.
Gen Z kids were getting the benefit of
Of
diverse
those
books,
books.
those
Mhm.
books.
Mhm.
We have proof that they work. We have
Mhm.
proof that it can change how people react. It is actually the way we fight prejudice and
Mhm.
racism and homophobia and transphobia. Like these books are so important, right?
Mhm.
Authors and
Mhm.
creators going to see kids in person so important
It
because
is.
it changes people, right? It makes
Mhm.
them more empathetic. It
Mhm.
works.
It does work.
And that's why we've got the backlash.
Mhm.
So now when we see that, we have to fight even harder.
We do. Yeah. And I think it's so empowering to you know, the waves, the ebbs and flows of a nonprofit or an organization that is doing good work. And I mean that I feel, and I'll speak for myself. And then seeing a wave where people are like, well, we don't need this anymore, or this isn't come bring value anymore. Like, and then to keep going, like, because in your heart you know that this is what we need as a society. How did this come about? Like, how did we need diverse books? Like, how was that created? um, I'm very curious of. I don't know this story, so I'm very very curious of this story. I know there's lots of people involved, but tell me how did it happen?
So actually, we go back to 2014, no, 2013, and what was it? Geez, I don't even know what year.
Don't worry
Oh,
about the date. It's okay.
before WNDB started, I was at a festival and I was with Lamar, Giles, and Meg Medina, two of my favorite people. And we had just done this panel. And for once, it wasn't a diversity panel, right? It was like, we are,
Amen.
and we're literally talking about the hero's journey. I remember we're just going, yeah, we need to be put more on panels like this, just where
Hmm.
we're talking about writing as opposed, because this was a writers' festival, as opposed to talking about, diversity and like,
Hmm.
how to write a diverse character, that kind of stuff. So oh, I was all like, I'm so tired of like how we're pigeonholed all the time and we just need to do something about it. And Lamar famously said, Ellen, as long as it's not illegal, I'm in. And and Meg, who, has been doing diversity work forever, was like, sure, but what? And that the but
Hmm.
what question stumped me, right?
Hmm.
And I'm a thinker. I think and I think and I just have to sit on things and figure out what it is I wanted to do.
Hmm.
But research is part of my process of figuring that out. For example, as a side note, now that I'm stepping down from WNDB in
Hmm.
June, I've been thinking and thinking about what's next for me because of what's happening, right? Like I think WNDB is really good and is addressing all the programs that it does very well,
Hmm.
and it can't grow really beyond that.
Hmm.
But we need to do something else. We need to do something else for the marketplace. And so right now, I'm in my thinking phase right now of
Hmm.
what's next. What can we do to once again kind of shift and change the industry,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um, Back then, my thinking phase was, okay, how do we address this? What do we do? And then you had the back-to-back op-ed articles by Walter Dean Myers and then Chris Myers on, the apartheid of children's literature. Um, and then BookCon came about, and like it was just kind of like it really is. It's a moment of being in the right place, thinking the right thing at the right
Mhm.
time, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And at that time, Twitter was a very favorable place. Social media was a good place for marginalized voices to be heard, right?
Mhm.
To kind of grow out of the echo chamber.
Mhm.
And so I think that all those things, I was like, okay, we're going to do something about it. Like started with all of these conversations that I was having separately, and then went on Twitter and had with Melinda Lowe, where people were like, I want to come help. I want in. Just tell me.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, I had like a group of 20 people going, all right. So what's next, Ellen? And I went,
Mhm.
okay. So at that time, what was really kind of like trending were people holding up signs with a hashtag, right, and showing a picture. And I was just like, that to me was really important, because I thought the visual was really like, it's not just enough to show words. It's important to
I
show
agree.
the people who's being affected. And I said, let's do a hashtag campaign, but make it visual. Let's let people tell their stories of what it was like not to see themselves in books
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
how that affected them. And then like some of my favorite tweets or promotional pictures were the ones that's like, there's the one with the little three black boys that said, we need diverse books so that you can know that we can be superheroes too,
Oh,
right? And that's before Black Panther, and I was like,
yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
this is exactly right. Because
Mhm.
I remember being told when I was younger that I couldn't be some superhero because I'm not white, right? I have a
Mhm.
story about my daughter dressing up as Cinderella and being told that she couldn't be Cinderella because she's not white.
Yep.
Like, we've all heard those stories.
Mhm.
So that's really kind of where it started. And,
Wow.
people just got together and it went
Wow.
viral.
It did, and it's. I mean, again, I am so appreciative of the work that the collective has done. Like I constantly hear we need diverse books as a resource constantly. And I'm international, and I mean, it's so great to hear other teachers talking about it, other librarians leaning on like you guys as like a resource. Because it not only makes me feel safe, but it also makes me believe in the work that my librarian may be trying to do in regards to creating a collection of books for the library or for classrooms as well, because I know it's coming from a source that is really trying to help kids understand empathy, understand humans as a whole. I'm just so grateful and I appreciate that because I know it didn't start where it is now. I know it started muddy and trying to understand like what it is you actually want to do and all the things. So thank you for staying with it because it's been very, very helpful.
No, I mean, we had an amazing executive
Uh
committee,
huh.
a bunch of wonderful people who worked so hard. Like I keep saying that during that period of time, I talked to Lamar, Aisha, Marika, Miranda, Eileen, and who else am I missing? Danielle. All these people, I talked to them more than my own family. Like
Of course. Uh huh.
because trying to start a nonprofit, it's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. It is. It is a lot of work, and it does not go unnoticed. That's for sure. Ellen, what do you do? You work extremely hard. I know you do. And you can't tell me that you don't. I know you do. What do you do for fun? What are some of the things that bring you joy?
So
And you can't say reading or writing.
I wasn't going to. I was actually going to say food. I love food. I love, I especially love when other people make the food because I don't like cooking so much. I'm a good cook though. I am.
Okay.
I don't really like cooking because it's just a lot of work. But I love eating. I
Uh-huh.
I love like finding restaurants. Love trying new things. Food makes me happy.
Would you call yourself a foodie?
No, I don't actually, because I feel like people who consider themselves foodies are kind of
Uh-huh.
very picky or very like gourmandy, right? And I totally
Uh,
not a gourmand. Like I will eat a
uh-huh.
hot dog and be so happy. Like, I love hamburgers. Like I'm not really into like very, very fancy seven
Mm-hmm.
course meals. I'm
Mm-hmm.
much more of a if there's a dirty alley hole with a mom and pop restaurant making authentic cuisine of whatever it is, I'm in.
Uh-huh.
It's gonna be really good, right? So yeah, no. So I don't know that I wouldn't call myself a foodie, but I appreciate food and I love it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
also I love K dramas. I gotta admit it. I do not watch anything but K dramas.
You know what's so funny? I actually had that question. I had a question in mind for you about just like television. I don't know what it was, but I had it in mind. I wasn't going to ask it to you, but it's so funny that you bring that up. And I don't watch K dramas, but I've heard a lot about them.
Yeah.
What are some of the K dramas that you watch?
Well, I just finished Queen of Tears, and that is like legitimately now one of my favorite K dramas. So it's so good. So I now I did lie. I do watch some. I do
Hmm.
watch C dramas and J dramas, and I also started some Thai dramas. So I watch a lot of Asian dramas, and I'm
Hmm.
gonna say something, and somebody's gonna be really mad about this, but I don't like American productions as much anymore because
Hmm.
it feels like, for example, like I walked in, my husband was watching that Viking show, right?
What's
And
the
I
Vikings? What's the Viking show?
like Viking show. He's totally into it. Like he's like literally like streaming it constantly every night.
Hmm.
And every night I walk down and I walk in and it's some horrible like rape scene or violence scene or
Awful.
like sex scene. And I'm like, every night I'm like, you're not rewatching the same episode. No. He's like, I'm on season 8 now, like 200 episodes in. And I'm like, it doesn't change. I
Yeah.
come in and I see this crap, right?
Uh-huh.
Uh, and so, like, I don't know. I feel like, and okay, here's the funny thing. Months ago, he was watching another show, and it was totally like, it was like an Asian cast. So it was, I want to say Badlands, something. So it was actually like Asian Western, right? And I
Hmm.
was like, okay, at least that one sounds great, right? Like, Western production of like Asian. Wow, that's great.
Uh-huh.
Every night I walk down, what do I walk in on?
Same thing.
Sex scene, violence.
And that's so true though, because I think Western television leans on two things: sex and violence. And I think
Mhm.
you might be thinking about Game of Thrones. That's what I thought about Game of Thrones when you're thinking
No,
about
that was a long time ago, and it applies. Same thing. Like, how
same
is it
thing.
that what I'm criticizing applies across the
It
genres of
does.
TV too?
It does. Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. And I watch a little bit of TV. I'm into like cooking shows right now.
Oh, I love cooking.
Uh, I love cooking shows. I love watching kids cook as well in like competitions. And I do watch sports when I have time. It's just I'm in a weird, not a weird time zone, but like in regards to watching like Western sports, it's just really hard. So I can catch them on like the weekend sometimes, but during the week, it's just I'll catch the score at the end of the day
Mhm.
because I'm usually teaching when the game's happening as well.
Right.
But I knew there was something. I knew there was something for you in regards to like what you do for joy outside of reading and writing, and I love that it's K dramas. I love that for you. I love that so much. Ellen, you have so many books, and you continue to produce so many beautiful books to the world. And can you tell me about the most recent book that you have? Hmm.
So the most recent book is YA. It's
Hmm.
called Colliding Worlds of Mina Lee, and the reason I wrote that one is because as a Gen Xer, my favorite music video is Aha's Take on Me. Do you know that
Oh,
video?
I do.
Love that music video. Love that song. I'm actually a big Aha fan. Like I have all their albums. Like people are like they're this very obscure European band, right? Like not for
Uh-huh.
me. I know all their music. So I loved that music video. And I was always kind of fascinated with this idea about, this girl reading a comic and being drawn into a comic, right?
Uh-huh.
And I wanted to write a story like that, and that's where Colliding Worlds with Mina Lee comes from. Plus,
Mm-hmm.
my kid is a web comic artist himself, so I was able
Oh,
to utilize personal firsthand experience to write this story about a web comic artist who creates a world and
oh, that
into
is so cool.
own world, but then she finds that she's no longer in control of what's happening in that world. And at the same time, she has to fix it before everything goes awry.
That's so dope. That's
No,
so dope.
it was what was not fun was that I did not realize until I was way into writing it that this was not a web comic novel alone, but it was actually a multiverse novel, and that I had to teach myself quantum mechanics and string
Oh,
theory. And
oh
I went,
wow. That's a whole nother layer. That's a whole nother layer.
oh my God, I did not enjoy that part because I do not like physics.
Oh, but you are a learner. You're definitely a learner. That's for sure.
I find as I get older, I have the ability to forget what I've learned immediately too. So don't even think about asking me about string theory.
Ellen, online you are. Well, I would call you active. Like I do see you online. Where can people find you online?
I think now that Twitter's or XYZ is basically a hellhole, I am most on Instagram
Mm-hmm.
and I'm also on TikTok. But for TikTok, it's weird. Like I'm more of a I just like watching TikToks more than like posting TikToks. But
Mm-hmm.
like if you want to like interact with me, I think I'm more on Instagram and Threads. Only
Okay.
because they're easy. They're kind of easy. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I want to thank you for hanging out with me.
oh,
This
thank
was
you.
lovely. This was lovely. It was just what I needed. It was the perfect time. I'm gonna stop. I can stop the recording here.